going to introduce our work and what we've done in the evolution of all our trainings in Brussels. I'm dealing with sustainable construction at the CDR. That's the logo you see here. And our specificity is that we are a platform actor. What does that mean? It means that we work for the others and with them. It means that we were created in the framework of the employment missions. In Brussels, we have a high number of unemployed people, and this is a very complex issue. And you are probably faced with similar issues in your respective countries. Construction is a sector with a lot of manpower, and the question was, aren't they additional jobs there, especially if we work on sustainable construction? So sustainable construction and employment, and that's what led to my organization. So it's a small structure, and 4 years ago we was told, well, you should organize training sessions for sustainable development for everyone, job seekers, professionals, trainers, professors. You just have to organize training sessions. And I said, well, fine, what should I do? You do what you want. So that's really the best mandate you can be given, but it was the most difficult one as well, because we are in an innovative sector. And this is why we've tried to work with the different stakeholders, the different training operators, also integration operators, people who are going to try and find a job for those job seekers. We are going to talk with the professionals. We are going to work with people who are really interested in training. We'll try and develop training sessions with them, identify the training needs first. And 4 years ago, it was not that easy to identify training needs. So it means that we are a player. Our work is to offer support to the training operators by developing training sessions. And so we'll develop training sessions. We're going to test them, and there we are training operators, because we are going to test the training modules, analyze them and adapt them, and in this way the training sessions will be improved. What are our means? First, consultation, of course, because we work with the different stakeholders and for the different bodies. We're going to develop educational material. We'll try and make sure that the money that we are given, because we receive money from the public authorities, we make sure it will benefit to different stakeholders in Brussels, and we also develop the educational material. We are in an innovative sector once again, and on Benoit's pictures you've seen the models when professions and architects are working together. Well, this is the result of one of our cooperation initiatives. We developed the 3D models together. You'll see other pictures. And on these pictures, there's educational material developed in the framework of our cooperation with the reference center. And what really matters, but which is quite difficult too in our mission, is to try and be ahead of the market and integrate innovation as soon as possible. It's a kind of educational watch and technical watch. We're not technicians as such. We're not experts. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a constructor or whatever. I'm an eco-advisor. And it means that we have to be very careful but you'll see this later on. You're not going to see it on this slide, but on the last one. It's one of the major difficulties, i.e. we are in an innovative model. So training is needed, you need to acquire things, and how can we speed up the integration of innovation in the training sessions in order to develop jobs and to develop the sector? That's the question. Then the link between employment and environment, the red link you see on the screen, is what Grégoire mentioned. It was a kind of mayonnaise effect, if I may say so, as we're in Belgium. So we put all the ingredients together and we mixed it up. And in this environment and employment and associations, we've thought of the box. We're not going to train people for them to get a job because we realized that it was not that obvious. We realized that it was important to use different leverages in the region in order to meet our targets. And that's one of our main missions. We want to help in terms of integration in Brussels. So this is another of our objectives. Environment, sustainable development, and the social integration. I've been asked to highlight elements that would encourage regions to see what has worked, what has been successful. Well, we are a platform, which means that we have a very general overview of the situation, and that's quite essential indeed. It's a global overview of the building, for example. We don't work on energy only, we don't work on window frames only, we really work on the global building. Everybody works together to make sure that it's a good building in energy terms, but from a general perspective as well. Then at macro level, it's about Brussels. We are asked to work on employment and integration, which means that we work with employers, with schools, with people who are going to join the sector, young graduates, etc. So it's very important to have a global approach and to be able to capitalize on experiences and to create links between the stakeholders. I don't know about the situation in your different regions, but in Belgium, integration and training are not really cooperating much in Brussels. What about the sector and the schools? So this is something we need to further develop as well. And in our country and in Brussels mainly, because we have two languages, it's like two boxes, two big boxes. And in the big box, there's a lot of very small boxes inside. And people get into a box and they don't want to get out of the box. So it's very difficult during a meeting or during a project to make these people work together. But that's why we're here. And that's a very interesting point. And innovation, I already mentioned it, but you'll see on the next slide it is not always that obvious. And then what also matters a great deal, and this is why we're a reference center, it's a capitalization. We need to capitalize on past experience. We're going to use part of the training for professional or part of the educational material to train teachers, for example. Then we're going to use another stakeholder, not really use, but let's say we are going to work with a cluster EcoBuild. That's another stakeholder in Brussels that stemmed from this Brussels dynamics, where companies want to focus on sustainable construction, and we're going to work with them to see who wants to become a trainer. So it's possible to react very quickly to different opportunities. Then the strengths are strengths, and this is probably why we've been able to achieve our partial success, because we haven't reached the total success yet, but I think we're on the right track to 2015. So what matters most? How can I put it? I see it in English on the screen, so it's very difficult to say it in French, says the speaker. So we need to share ideas, because as you've seen this morning, there are plenty of actions in Brussels, and what is absolutely needed is to work together and to share ideas. Then on the second line, you see that we are, as a reference center, we're a very small organization. I have one colleague with me here. I think it means that we have 1/3 of the organization in this room here. We are 6 or 7 people. How can I put it? We like... it's very difficult to say. It's like a tadpole. We can try and test new things, and thanks to the public authorities who give us the means, who give us the money to do it. And we can run a certain risk thanks to this money. And it is possible because we're not institutional, because we're not too big, so we're flexible enough. And we work with the institutions. You know, we never work in isolation. We also always work with the institutions. It's on these pilot projects so that they can test things without them to change the whole organization. So that's the purpose of our small organization, and that's why we were given the means to do it.
No. So one of the things that are not particularly easy, I'll take the third bullet point, are the training of professional practice. You've seen with Benoit how many hours need to be taught. There's a lot of a lot of quantity that is needed in order to be able to fund it. But there is also a question of quality. When you're innovating, I imagine in your countries you also have benchmarks about training, you have a framework, very structured, very clearly defined. But once you know everything, it's no longer innovation. We are innovating, so we cannot have a clear, defined framework. And at some point we need to just reassure ourselves, not so much be obsessed by the standards, but rather by the experience. So maybe what we said 2 years ago is no longer that much up to date, but this is part of our work. We always have to question ourselves, the way we work, and always go forward, learning on the field. And this is a fascinating experience. I will conclude. Three important things. First, it's not particularly rewarding. So if you training, it's very difficult to see the concrete results. Of course, they can be measured, and Charline will give you figures in the sector. But what does it change? What does it fundamentally change in the sector? That's not difficult to see. The effects are not particularly obvious, so it's not always very rewarding. We're part of a sector that needs to change, and there are, of course, there is resistance to change, but this is always like this. This is a second difficulty. And the last question, what Grégoire said, is about there is a lot of renovation work that is carried out in Belgium, done without architect, without a main contractor. So it's not the same type of work as when you're part of a town planning structure. It's not the same stakeholders. You have different organizations. It's very difficult then when the renovation is carried out on its own. So finally, little pictures. These are training courses that we gave in 2009-2010. The first training courses, so as you will see, the rooms were not particularly fit, but we did what we could. We trained on insulation and airtightness, and we needed a lot of practice. This is what they needed to show them how it works on the field. We have them test the works, test the building, test the windows, for example, in terms of airtightness. This is something else. I spoke a lot about training. Charline will also describe the training for professionals. But there is one point we haven't yet really tackled. We don't yet have a global strategy for this one. It's the area of teaching. It is crucial, and once again, I'm sure these are big questions that you have yourselves. How do you structure and develop teaching and courses without having courses replacing teaching? Because we need classes for young people aged 12 to 18, and nowadays it's very difficult to draw 14-year-olds towards the construction sector, towards vocational studies. So there is a huge stake here to draw them to these subjects of teaching in order to fill in the needs for 2015 for passive building, but more generally for sustainable construction.